My name is Konstantin Chaykin. I'm a watchmaker, inventor and founder of my own eponymous manufacturer. On 23rd October 2003, without any specialist education, technical basis or capital, I started to make my own tourbillon, the first in Russia for 175 years. This is how the Konstantin Chaykin manufacturer was born, the only company in Russia specializing in haute horlogerie. On 22nd of June, I received the latest patent for my inventions, my 80th in total. We haven't received the official document yet, but we should get it in a couple of weeks. One of the first, or the very first, patents was a device for determining the date of Orthodox holidays. Today I'm also writing an application for a new patent. It's about 60 pages. With a lot of maths and physics calculations that nobody has ever worked out before. So you have the prototype and you would like to ask about the fastening? No, about the ETA movement in general. You're done for now, well done. Now I'll take it all parts again, because you still need to put the minute hand on it. Once again, on the right side we have the winding mechanism, and on the left the adjuster. This is how it works. Set it to 12, the same as the rest of the hands. We have the remontoire, pallet, balance, that's everything. Keep going. All watches start with an idea, and it's a long journey to get from this idea to the finished product. Before I start working with the actual materials, I always use a sketch. It helps me to combine three things: the appearance of the timepiece, how the movements will look, and its philosophy. Therefore, in order to create the concept of a watch, you need to draw in detail a lot of parts of the movement, individual components of the watch, and the decorative elements. Working with sketches is maybe my own quirk, because I know a lot of watchmakers or constructors who don't use any kind of drafts or sketches. To start working on an idea, they do it on the computer straight away. I'm a bit more old school, which maybe comes from my childhood, because I loved to draw. Now if I find the time or inspiration, I still like to look for some themes, images, etc., and try to note them down. The birth of a watch, the birth of the final look, of the external design, and of the mechanism is quite a smooth evolutionary process which is constantly alive. And obviously, in the search for new forms and ideas, I try to refer to my notebook, to my sketches where I have drawn some components, which I later turn into 3D models, which we can see on the computer. It's difficult to remember clear moments from my childhood connected with watches, as watches didn't really figure in my life very often. There was no time when I looked at a watch and understood that my life is connected to it. It just didn't happen. The only person who had any clear connection with watches was my grandmother, who worked at 23 Nevsky Prospect, one of the oldest watch services in Leningrad. She was in charge of taking the watches for repair. Probably one of the most important moments, which set me on this path, was when at Pioneer Camp I signed for a group for radio enthusiasts whose radio station enabled you to connect with the whole world. At first I learned Morse code, and then I saw how people worked on an amateur radio station. I climbed trees to hang the antenna and helped earthing it. There was a time when I would collect old radio components and TV circuit boards from rubbish dumps and solder them. I really liked all this. Then I had the experience of creating some kind of basic crystal radio, and this all led me to the realization that I wanted my life to be connected with this. And after school, I went to Ernst Teodorovich Krenkel Radio Electronics and Communications College on Vasilyevsky Island, where I began to study and learn about radio communications. It really inspired me. I was already 18 when I graduated, so I had to join the army. And after demobilization, I realized that I needed to find a job and went to start my future career as a locksmith. I learned to saw, drill holes in iron, and carry heavy iron doors on my back up to the 12th floor. Then my first knowledge of working in a small business for real, with money and the chance to communicate with different people, I got from working for 3 years as a sales agent, going door to door offering stuff, hawking to people. Ruslan, ex-business partner, and I could in fact, for very little money, I say 3,000, he says 5,000 rubles, start our own micro-business. We bought watches in Moscow, took them to St. Petersburg and sold them there. Why the first thing was watches exactly and not underwear or something, I don't know. It's just how it happened. There was no defining reason why we started to buy watches in Moscow and not something else. The watches had a lot of defects, so then we started repairing them. We put up a notice and simply called it the Watch and Clock Restoration Center. And this started to draw me in deeper. How do they work? Let's see what other watches there are. And I started to collect antique watches. And a lot of things started to take shape around this. It turned into some kind of passion, a desire, a kind of business I wanted to work in. At some point, we thought we need to make our own watches. In fact, it was more Konstantin's idea to do something ourselves. I thought, if I had the simple option to sell something already made, why invent something? If you already have something to earn you money, Konstantin said we need to do it ourselves. Now I'm going to introduce you to the Holy Grail, the watchmaking book. This is my first copy in French. At that time there wasn't an English version. I got the English one later. I got my hands on this one in 2004, and it was already old by then. It's even been chewed by a dog. For me it was, and for many people still is, a go-to reference book. It tells you precisely how to create a watch movement, how to make a watch, how to make every component, how to calculate it all. And of course, for a young apprentice who's just starting to learn about watchmaking, it's like a mentor. I think I've already mentioned, I was in the archives of the Academy of Sciences because I wanted to reconstruct Kulibin's planetary timepiece. I collected quite a lot of material. All the calculations there were made with a compass and ruler. And besides that, the manufacture of the components was also quite primitive. Wonderful, wonderful book. Here is an 1819 engraving, for example. The years sound so pleasant, 18-something. Look, here it describes different pinches, shows the differences in force, and explains how they all work together. The construction of the cogs is described here. Here, the principles of a carillon and organ. At some point I understood that existing timepieces don't have enough about them. I want to make something different. When we opened our first little shop, Ruslan and I decided to make wall clocks. I sketched the design. We bought some German clock movements with hands and we went to a factory so we could directly order parts based on my sketches. They cut the pieces of stainless iron and shaped them as we wanted, marked the numbers with a laser, developed and created the packaging, instructions, everything for clocks ready-made for the shelves. The next major step was my father's 50th birthday in 2003. And for that great occasion, I decided to make him a present, a watch I made myself, for which I bought a Swiss watch movement. My target was to make a case, a self-designed dial and hands. At that point, 17 years ago, the level of manufacturing was very low. But anyway, the watch was made. I'd already made a wall clock, a wristwatch. What more could I do? There's another cool mechanism called a tourbillon. Okay, I thought, let me try it. I read up on it, how it all works, and it didn't seem too difficult. When Konstantin said that he would make a tourbillon, a lot of experts said it'd never work. It's too difficult. I didn't say it wouldn't work. I knew that everything is possible, especially if it had been before. I just thought about how much it would cost, and with which resources. But I didn't dwell on that. It just had to be done. The tourbillon was invented in 1795 by Abraham Louis Breguet as a purely technical means of optimizing stroke accuracy when a balance wheel and a few other technical components are installed in the carriage. It's costly to make and fiddly to assemble and adjust. Since the beginning of the 1990s, the tourbillon has been seen as a symbol of fine watchmaking because of its challenging production, assembly and need for precision adjustment by a very highly skilled and experienced watchmaker. The best watch and clock brands feel obligated to add a tourbillon to their collection in order to raise their prestige. Theoretically, the system itself is very simple, but technically you need to make a highly precise construction, a frame called a carriage, made of very thin components, in order to not make it too heavy very precisely, which rotates around the balance wheel. His first prototype was made using a fret saw. And it worked. Damn, everything worked. It means it's possible to make a tourbillon. And after that, I started making timepiece mechanisms of my own design. Well, how I saw it. I didn't have a watchmaking education or a mentor who could show me how it works. No experience in designing clocks or watches. Basically, I made them as I saw them and drew them. My first clock was made without CNC. We had a fret saw and primitive tools to make everything. A little drilling machine, everything without computers. Actually, it was the first tourbillon made in Russia since pre-Soviet times. Nobody had done it before me. I thought it was pretty cool, so I wrote to Vyacheslav Medvedev at the Watch Business magazine. It was about 2003. We were publishing some magazines, Watch Business and My Watch. One day the phone rang. It was Konstantin, who seemed like a wonderful young watchmaker. He'd made a timepiece with a tourbillon. Back then it seemed a kind of a questionable, boring idea, and I didn't really pay it much attention. But actually, it was a unique example of how a person, independent of any watch factory or company, had made something fundamentally new and interesting in Russia. That's how our magazine came to publish an article about the first Russian tourbillon, and as far as I know, it was the first article about Konstantin. It gave me a huge boost because it showed it wasn't only interesting for me, but for someone else too. It made me keep going. In fact, of all the processes that come before the emergence of a new timepiece, planning is the most important. Those mistakes that appear at the planning stage of the watch and its movement are the most terrible, the most painful. Because if you plan the watch movement incorrectly, it will not work, and obviously the work of the whole team, me included, will be wasted. It should also be noted that the components of a watch don't function alone. compared with a piece of jewelry where the item can be independent, a ring for example. In watch movement, absolutely every part, whether static or dynamic, always interacts with another. Nowadays, since hundreds of parts interact with each other, the final check is done on the prototype. At first, models of all the components are made on the computer, then sketches are made of these models. These sketches help to obtain the required dimensions, the dimensions of the parts themselves, and the tolerances of the parts, according to which they are made in the milling and turning departments. And then the sketch is sent to the production department. For example, this sketch of a bridge part was used to make the CNC program in the production department. Tolerances were calculated based on the sketch, and after that, the part was made, sent to be checked in quality control, and then, if everything was okay and the tolerances were met, it was sent for assembly, having proven good enough to be placed into the watch movement. In around 2005, there was a complete turnaround in my work. A quantum leap from simply being a craftsman, copying what had been done before, to becoming an inventor. When the first idea came to me in 2005, it seemed very mysterious and revolutionary to create a timepiece with an orthodox Easter date indicator, a computer's clock. I made it in secret. I didn't tell anyone. I gathered the information and began to figure out how to do it. It seemed to be a phenomenal leap that would definitely take me to the world of haute horlogerie. In the end, that's how it worked out, because after 3 years, I went to Basel with what was already my second computus. And with that, I was admitted to the International Horological Academy. Since most of the work at that time was taken up by complex calculations, and the first construction of the computus wasn't very complicated, the clock was made in only about 6 months. It is still in the museum of our manufacturer. About 10 years later, I wanted to make another clock with an orthodox Easter date indicator, and I faced a choice about its image and architecture, how it should look, its content and its implementation. Among the symbols that seemed most interesting to me, I chose one of the most well-known symbols of my birthplace, St. Petersburg, St. Isaac's Cathedral. In my opinion, it's an outstanding piece of architectural art with a number of different elements to the cathedral itself, both interior and exterior, which I've tried to use in my clock. I think I succeeded well with that, because the same kind of mosaics which are inside the cathedral I've used to decorate the exterior of different elements of the clock. The clock naturally turned out to be much more complicated, because in addition to the tourbillon and perpetual calendar, it contained a number of additional astronomical functions. And the most interesting thing is that the orthodox Easter date indicator was much more complicated than in the first clock. It contained about 300 parts and is in fact one of, if not the most complicated devices to have an indication with a single hand. So, in order to calculate the date of Easter and change the display, requires 300 parts. The fourth and latest computer's clock, which I've created so far, is the Moscow computer's clock, which recreates the image of St. Basil's Cathedral. To date, it is the most complicated clock ever created in Russia. It contains 2,506 components in the movement alone and about 2,500 elements in the case, with 26 complicators, or clock functions. Among them, in addition to the perpetual calendar, there are such unique features as an analemma and a special tellurium device, as well as its specialty, the orthodox Easter date indicator, which automatically calculates the date of Orthodox Easter of that year. We now find ourselves in the machining area, where virtually all our watch parts are manufactured. Here in this zone we turn parts. The piece to be worked on is rotated and shaped with the help of a tool cutter. We use different sized machines. For example, this Tourbillon machine is used to make case parts. And on this little machine, literally under the microscope, we make the smallest gears, the smallest parts. Here, for example, a part of the Mars watch, an axle measured to tenths and hundredths of a millimeter. Here in our milling section, programs for the CNC machines are written, and at that moment, the model of the latest Mars watch is open, from which we take out one piece at a time, write programs for the CNC and make them on the machines. One of the most important elements is finishing. After producing the parts of the turning and milling machines, they are processed like individual pieces of jewelry. It's not only necessary to make each individual part look beautiful, but also for it to be precise. The dial is one of the most complex parts, with a lot of laborious operations. One of these is painting, a very sterile and precise operation. When magnified under a loupe or microscope, no defects should be visible on the surface. It should be noted that the coating on the dial is multi-layered, the number of which can sometimes reach 100. Watchmaking as we know it today appeared in 16th century in Switzerland, and about 1600 there were about 100 watchmakers in Geneva. This was due to the fact that in Europe there were precautions against Protestants, and most French and German Protestants moved to Switzerland. Jean Calvin, the founder of Calvinism, the head of Protestantism, passed the law at one point, which massively helped the development of watchmaking. He completely banned luxury. Jewelers who were working in Switzerland at that time were forced to look for an alternative source of income. And they found it: watches. Today they have dozens, hundreds of watchmakers, a huge industry, the best in the world, which has for hundreds of years been making beautiful, jewelry-like watches. When creating watches in Russia, I obviously didn't think about the qualities a watchmaker requires. I began to understand that to create highly complicated, beautiful objects, you need qualities like precision and responsibility, which are instilled in Swiss watchmakers. I had a big problem with that. I really had to work on myself. And once I started to employ people in my manufacture, I had to instill those same qualities in them, qualities which are not natural characteristics of a Russian person. Get rid of all that. I usually go around the outline. Yep. You could do it like that, of course. I would do an intermediate version so that the small bit comes here. Okay, let's do a couple of hundredths more. Yes, sounds good. Thank you. This is the Night Joker, which we made here and needs to be shown to Sergei Mikhailovich. Okay, I'll check it now. Masha brought it to me to see if there's any dust, dirt, scratches. If everything is okay, I'll show Sergei Mikhailovich. The problem we have today is a problem with personnel. In general, the level of competence, which maybe doesn't only end with the production of watches, but extends to many other professions too. Finding good staff and specialists is very difficult. When you want to hire a turner to turn parts for wrist watches, for example, I'm afraid that you probably won't be able to find such people in Moscow. You need to look for a different specialist, either a novice who can't do anything yet, or a turner with a different qualification, who must be retrained to make smaller parts. It's the same for any other operation we do here: milling, project designing, etc. You have to constantly oversee how this person works, their retraining, education, etc. To develop a specialist for such a precise and difficult industry as watchmaking takes months or even years. Here's something written in German. It's a landmark document when I was first presented at the General Meeting of the Academy of Independent Watchmakers, AHCI. At that time, Peter Widmer was the president, who later came to St. Petersburg to check out my workshop. The Academy of Independent Watchmakers is the most influential international organization uniting the best independent watchmaking craftspeople. I first heard about the existence of the Academy in 2007 and really wanted to be a part of it, especially as they had never had a watchmaker from Russia. In spring 2008, when I brought my Resurrection Computer's clock and Mystery 1000 Jewels watch to be judged by the Academy, which even by today's standards are incredibly complicated timepieces, they couldn't believe that all that work had been done in a small workshop. Having looked at the timepieces, it seemed to me they were really surprised and sent a commission for verification. The president, Peter Widmer, came with his wife to check how they were produced, that they were not made in a big factory financed by oil billionaires, but they were designed, created and assembled by a watchmaker with his own hands. After that, in late 2008 in Vienna, at one of the autumn exhibitions which was held by the AHCI, they accepted me as a candidate for the Academy. 2 years later, in 2010, I was accepted as a full member. And in 2016, it so happened that I became president of the Academy. And I held this position for 2.5 years. The scales and indicators on the dial are made using the pad printing technique. It's a complex, high-precision process of transferring paint to the dial from the matrix, where lines can be hundredths of a millimeter thick. And apart from that, you mustn't spoil the multi-layered coating already applied. As you can already see, the creation of each part is a highly complicated process. There are not hundreds, but thousands of operations required to make a single watch, and the watch still needs to be assembled. The watchmaker's task during assembly is to preserve the purity and beauty of the parts, so the level of accuracy has to be much higher than we are used to seeing with standard watchmakers. First, we take each little mechanism, then they are put together into the watch movement, on which the dial is placed. Then we add the indicators, the hands for example. The whole structure is then placed into the pre-assembled watch case. The parts are sent to the quality control department, where several things are checked: the geometry of the parts, the quality of the finishing and galvanized coating, and the quality of the dial. While assembling a watch, up to 50 important parameters are also checked to ensure the watch is absolutely flawless. The functioning, reliability, durability and sealing of the client's watch are also checked so that nothing can go wrong in future. This is a colossal level of responsibility.
Nous sommes très heureux de remettre le prix
We're
ce
so
soir.
happy to be
Prix de l'audace
awarding this Audacity Prize
Konstantin Chaykin.
to Konstantin Chaykin.
Konstantin Chaykin de la maison Konstantin Chaykin, justement.
And Mr. Konstantin Chaykin from his
Je
eponymous
rejoins sur
house
scène. Que
will be
peut-on
joining us
dire?
on stage.
This award is from the Geneva Grand Prix, the Golden Hand, which is in fact the accumulation of 15 years' work. The path I've taken being highly appreciated. Really cool. I should say that the Audacity Prize was a separate category, not on the main list of nominations. The watch was in the Little Hand category, and the award was received for Audacity. It pretty much proves that I'm doing non-conformism, not following the beaten path. But I didn't get an award immediately. I applied in 2013 with my cinema watch. It was named one of the 5 best watches in Basel that year, but unfortunately it didn't pass the jury's judgment. The next year, I decided to apply again with a real work of art, my Carpe Diem watch, but unfortunately, it also wasn't selected. So after a few years and some really hard work creating the Joker watch, which really amazed everyone, for the first time my watch was shortlisted. Unfortunately, it didn't make the final selection. So when I got the main award, this golden hand, the following year, it was really cool. And it's great that finally this award came to Russia. I had 2 nominations, one with the clown watch, the other co-creation with Sven Andersson, the Joker automaton. Obviously, my chances were twice greater than previous year. 2 categories, one for mechanical exception with the Joker automaton, where I was nominated but didn't win. Okay, fine. I thought I have a chance with the second category, that little hand, which would be announced later. They announced the winners. Okay, no. Okay, it didn't work out, a real pity, especially twice. Then they announced a new category, the Audacity prize, but not one watch nominated was revealed. It was some kind of additional prize. And they announced the Audacity prize, Konstantin Chaykin, with the clown watch. I stood up. People stared at me. Who's that? Because before that, all the brands that had been nominated or won were quite big and well known, often having taken part for over 100 years. I went to the stage, obviously feeling very nervous because the hall was full of people, not something I'm used to. I took out a speech I'd prepared in English and started reading it, and then I remembered I had a lot of admirers in Russia, so I finished the speech in Russian. I know a lot of people are now watching me. In the hall there are also people from Russia, and I'm pleased to know that I'm the first person from Russia who has stood on this stage. It's been a lot of work. Thank you everyone. Thank you. After the ceremony was over, we had a gala dinner. It was really nice, exciting and really cool. That's when you've achieved a difficult yet incredible goal, after walking your path and finding yourself at the top, surrounded by all these people, something which seemed absolutely impossible earlier. And there you are. It is, of course, awesome. I'm at an interesting stage in my life. I've completed many successful projects, and each time you need to understand that you want to do something more interesting and more complex, and you must set a higher bar for yourself. The next project, which I hope will be finished by autumn, is the Lukemoria clock. It is a clock which shows the time by winding a special chain on a drum. It is a really complex clock, which I've been making for more than 4 years with probably one of the most famous Russian jewelers, Ilgiz Fazilzyanov. I'm also still working on the Mars theme, since I've already applied for and received a lot of different patents for inventions on this theme, and I'll continue to work on this. At the very beginning, as far as I understand, Konstantin just wanted to create something that would simply work, some kind of mechanism. Now he's concentrating on the creation of truly luxurious timepieces. He's a unique example showing what a person can achieve and what can be achieved by watchmaking in Russia. Even if it is being led by just one person. It is a person whose heart is dedicated to timepieces, a person who really supports the idea and has a mind capable of inventing such works. That's how, over 17 years, a small workshop on the outskirts of St. Petersburg has turned into a Moscow manufacturer with a globally recognized name, where up to 200 prestigious, collectible timepieces a year are made. In 2003, when I dared to make a tourbillon, it was difficult to imagine where it would take me. But today, I can make the most complex timepieces in the world.